Hello and welcome back to the College Football Fanatics podcast. It's been a couple of weeks since we last had an episode, so it's we've got a lot to cover in this episode. It's not going to be too long of an episode. I It's only going to be about 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, but it should be a fun episode. There was a lot that happened, particularly last week as well as last night. The college football playoff rankings were released. We had a bit of a scuffle in Michigan Stadium's tunnel that leads out to their field. Penn State and Ohio State had a pretty thrilling game. It was a really fun game to watch. We have a really cool upcoming game with Tennessee and Georgia playing each other, number one and number two. So we're gonna get right into it. Um, I don't want to spend too much time on the Michigan and Michigan State scuffle that happened on Saturday last weekend. From what I can tell, so far there's been about 7 players that have been suspended from the Michigan State football team. I'm not going to name their names, but they look. It looks like Michigan State's doing right by. I think it was Jimon Green, and I can't remember the other players' names. But if you guys haven't seen the video, essentially what happened was a bunch of Michigan State players got into a bit of a scuffle with the Michigan player, with a couple of Michigan players, and at one point there was a Michigan State player just wailing on a Michigan player with his helmet, and that was particularly a brutal. That was a particularly brutal thing to watch. It actually got a little difficult to watch at towards the end, but I think it was Jimon Green that was getting hit, but I hope he's all right. Um, and Harbaugh came out and said that an apology wasn't going to be enough, and that this had to be handled at the highest levels, and I pretty much completely agree with that. An apology where a player's getting wailed on, and I think at least one player ended up with a concussion. I don't know if the second player has any injuries or not, but it's pretty bad. I think there's going to be criminal charges that come out of this, and it's going to be Michigan State might even face some repercussions out of this, and I think for the next for till the end of the season at least, there's going to be a lot of talk about the culture at Michigan State, and Mel Tucker as a coach, and what he really and can he control his players? Because I think this partially represented a lack of control over his players, and um, and I've heard people say, oh, it's the tunnel construction. A few weeks ago we had Penn State was playing at Michigan, and there was reports of Penn State players throwing peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at Michigan players, and there was a lot of talk in the game, or in the tunnel, and James Franklin was like, "Oh, it's the tunnel construction," and people have kind of run with that, and blamed the Michigan State thing on tunnel construction. And I look at that and I'm like, Michigan has been playing football in that stadium for near 100 years, and they've been playing football at the collegiate level for over 100 years. They've been playing since 1879, which is like 150 some odd years. They've got over 800 wins, and they have well over 1,000 games played in that stadium, and to say that it's solely because of tunnel construction is completely ridiculous. Unless unless Michigan's gotten really good at hiding fights that break out every week. I mean, you don't see Rutgers or Maryland or Illinois or Wisconsin or Nebraska fighting each other over it. So it's gonna be it's only when when Michigan State or Ohio State come to town. Really, that's only when it really matters. And you didn't see this happen last year when Michigan played at Michigan State, and no, and nothing happened there. I mean, fights didn't happen. So I think it's partially because the rivalry means a little more to little brother Michigan State. And I think that really, that really makes a complete difference about how Michigan State reacts when they lose. They're absolutely insufferable when they win, and when they lose, they're also pretty insufferable as well. So it's fun to see that. So that's all I kind of want to say on that. It's not a great topic that I love to talk about. It's a sad topic because the game was fun to watch. Michigan won pretty handedly. Um, Michigan State did go into the second quarter with the lead, but that was the end of just about everything that was good for Michigan State. Um, Michigan then came back and scored 26 unanswered points essentially. And that was a big game for Michigan. So now Michigan has they have the most recent game that they've played against everybody in the conference has been a win. That's a pretty fun thing to think about. So every time they've played a team, the most recently, they've all been wins. So um, we'll see about that. So next up, Penn State and Ohio State. This was a really fun game to watch. I was really sad that Penn State lost. I really, really, really wanted to see them beat Ohio State. I wanted to see Ohio State pretty much drop out of the top five, but we didn't get that. There were a lot of issues that I think Penn State exposed for Ohio State that hadn't really been exposed before. I think that up against a really tough defense, Ohio State really struggled, um, and it turned into who could capitalize on the best moments, and in the end, in the fourth quarter, um, Ohio State scored 28 points, and it was definitely enough to win. Um, there the fact that Ohio State scored 28 points in the fourth quarter, I think, really proves that Ohio State um, can get into a situation that they're not happy with, but they can still pull out a win. And I'm really excited to see what they do in the end of November, at the end of this month, with their game against Michigan. I think it's probably going to be one of the best games of the year. It usually is, but I think it's definitely more competitive this year. I don't think it's going to be a blowout like it was last year. I still think Michigan's going to win. But I think it's going to be a very, very close game. I think it's going to be very much like the 2016 game, where I think Ohio State was ranked like number 2 and Michigan was ranked number 3, and it was a really close game. I think it's going to be very, very similar to was either 2016 or 2018. I think it's going to be very similar to that. I don't think Ohio State's going to be able to blow out Michigan, and I don't think Michigan's going to be able to blow out Ohio State. Um, Michigan's had a has had a Michigan has had a lot of trouble in the red zone. Um, their plays are just non-creative. And this is a thing that I have been seeing. Once Michigan gets within 20 yards of the end zone, Michigan just loses all creativity in their plays, and even throughout the rest of the field, they aren't super creative. And I think part of what made them so successful last year was they were so creative in the ways that they moved the ball, not just on the ground. I mean, when they had at least one trick play every game. They ran jet sweeps like at least once a quarter, and they ran a few reverses sometimes. And I Michigan has lost that creativity this year. And I think for them to really kick it into fifth gear, Michigan needs to get more creative in the end zone, especially. But I mean, creative overall. They just need to be far more creative, because if they can't score, if they have to settle for field goals, they're not going to win against any of the better teams. So, all right. Next up is let me see. So, next up is Illinois. So, Illinois has been a pleasant surprise this year. So, Illinois is currently 7-1. They haven't really a couple of teams that they should blow out, they have blown out, but they haven't really blown out too many teams. There was more close wins than I think they'd like. I mean, they blew out Nebraska 26-9. They beat Minnesota 26-14. They beat Iowa 9-6. Beat Wisconsin 34-10. They beat Chattanooga 31-0. They beat UVA 24-3. They got beat by Indiana 23-20. And then they beat Wyoming 38-6. So the closest game they obviously had was the Iowa game and the Indiana game. They both are by the same margin, 3 points. It's just they won one and lost the other. So it's really been very surprising to see how they've been doing this summer. They really snuck up on me. I didn't think they were going to do as well as they have. And on the flip side, Boston College is a team that has been really disappointed. I thought they were going to do much better than they've done. They've lost to just about everybody. I mean, I think they've only won 2 games. I think they've only won 2 games this season. So it really is a struggling team this year. I thought they were going to win. I thought at this point in the season, in week 10, they were going to be closer to like 5-3 at this point, or 5-4. So I really thought it was going to be much more in their court. So next up, Georgia and Tennessee play this upcoming weekend. This is the first time a number 1 and number 2 seeded team in the AP poll have played each other in the regular season since November 5th, 2011. And that game was LSU versus Alabama. And the score actually ended up being 9-6, which is a pretty crazy score. This game, I don't know what to say about this game. I mean, this game could end up being the game of the century, as the LSU Alabama game was is known. This I think this game will be very competitive. It's going to be fun to know that there's only be at most 5 undefeated teams in the in at by the time we talk next week. Um, and that could be dropped to 6 with Clemson playing Notre Dame. Um, but particularly this game I think is going to turn into a shootout. Um, I think Hendon Hooker and Stetson Bennett, I think it's really going to rely on what type of quarterback play there is, particularly in the form of Stetson Bennett. Are we going to see um, are we going to see the are we going to see the national championship winning quarterback, or are we going to see a quarterback that I have seen struggle at some points in this season? And I think it's going to be really reliant on that. It's going to be really reliant on who can get after the quarterback the most as well. So I'm really excited to see this matchup. Um, Hopefully it opens an avenue for maybe 2 Big Ten teams, Ohio State and Michigan, to enter the college football playoffs and maybe face off against maybe these 2 teams, or maybe facing off against Clemson um, and whoever wins this game. So um, I think this game has a lot of really important um, repercussions about repercussions about how this will end up affecting the playoff committee and their selection um, for games this season. So it'll be really interesting. It should be a really fun game. Um, I'm not going to be able to watch it in person, or I'm not going to be able to watch it on TV. I'll actually be I'll be on my way to the Rutgers Michigan game at Rutgers. Um, so that's going to be a very fun game, I think, to watch. I'll have to rewatch it. I'll have to tape it. And when I get home that night, I'll definitely have to either sit down and watch it that night, or watch it Sunday morning after the Formula One race. So it'll be really cool. It'll be really fun to watch it. So the next one is Notre Dame and Clemson is the next big game that I want to talk about. Clemson has scraped by scraped by a lot of teams this year, and I really would like to see them lose, not because I harbor any sort of ill feelings towards Clemson. Um, I want to see them lose for a completely different reason. If they lose, it opens up the possibility that a one-loss Michigan or a one-loss Ohio State team could get into the college football playoff, and we could have 2 Big Ten teams. That is the sole reason that I want to see them lose. But like they had a close game against Wake. They've had close games against FSU. They had a close game against Syracuse, which um, Notre Dame beat Syracuse very handedly, and and Clemson got by on 6 points. So I think that this is I don't think that Clemson is on the same level of Michigan or Ohio State or anybody within the top 5. our top four in the AP poll. I don't think Clemson is as talented. I don't think that they have the same speed or athleticism that those teams have. I think they're good. I think they're a quality team. Um, but no, I don't think that they are better than Ohio State or Michigan. I think if Michigan and or Ohio State played them tomorrow on a neutral field, uh, both teams would probably win by a good 14 points against Clemson. So that's what I that's just a guess, but yeah. So I really want to see. I want to see Clemson lose, but I still think it should be a very fun game. Watch it if you can. Um, it's gonna be a 7:30 kickoff, um, Eastern time. So it'll be a lot of it'll be definitely an interesting game to see how Notre Dame, who has been struggling this season, um, faces up against one of the better teams. Um, so the next thing I want to talk about is the college football playoff rankings came out last night. And I have a few issues with this particular rankings. I actually tend to agree with the AP top 25 a bit better. Number one, I actually agree that Tennessee is probably the best team in the country right now. I think that they've been playing the best football out of anybody. They just dominated Kentucky, and they really proved their dominance over pretty much everybody they've played in the SEC so far. So, as I said, the Tennessee Georgia game, it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top. Um, Somebody in that group is going to drop out of the top four after that game because of just the loss. I wouldn't be surprised if they get ahead of Clemson and behind Michigan though. But it'll still be a fun game. I think Ohio State again is the number 2 team in the country. They also have been playing some pretty top tier football. Um, Georgia has struggled against some opponents um, that I think they shouldn't have struggled against. Um, but I still think that Georgia is another top team. Obviously, they're still undefeated. They just played Florida and won by 22 points. They played Vanderbilt and obviously won that game handedly by 55. The games that I'm thinking of are the UGA and Missouri game. I think that they really shouldn't have struggled in that game. They should have absolutely dominated on that game, but they didn't. I didn't actually watch that game, so I'll have to go back and rewatch it and figure out why they struggled on that game. But um, they, I think they should have beat Kent State by more than 17 points, but they beat Kent State. So it's one of the it's just one of those things where it's like it should have been by more, but it's a win's a win. So um but the next team in the college football playoff rankings is Clemson. Um and I strongly disagree with this um with this choice. I think that Clemson is not better than Michigan. I think Michigan has a more impressive win in Penn State. Um, if Penn State wins against Maryland, um, then I think Penn State has proven that they're still a solid team and that the Michigan domination of them. I mean, if they were still playing to this day, Michigan would still be running on them. I mean, when you put 400 yards on a team and embarrass them, it's kind of hard to get over. But I think Clemson. I think Clemson's um, best win was the uh, was when they played. It was against Syracuse at the time, who was ranked 14th. Clemson also has ranked wins against NC State. And sorry, NC State was actually Clemson's best win. They were ranked 10th at the time. Syracuse was ranked 14th. And then they also played Wake. Yes, Michigan hasn't played a ton of ranked opponents, but I don't think that NC State is currently ranked anymore. Oh no, they are. So they're down to 21. So all of Clemson's ranked opponent wins are in the 20s. So Wake Forest is 20, NC State is 21, and Syracuse is 22. I think this shows a very this shows that the teams were not as good as they had been when Clemson played them. I think probably by the end of the season, those three teams will all most likely drop out of the top 25. They'll end up being unranked. So I don't think Clemson should be ahead of Michigan. I think Michigan got really snubbed by the committee on that one. Then you got next up Alabama with 7-1. I tend to agree with that ahead of TCU. If Alabama had been in the top four, I would have probably thrown my computer across the room when I was reading the rankings this morning, because for Alabama to be in the top five or top four ahead of Michigan and Clemson, you'd have to really make an argument that playing in the SEC is just 1,000 times harder than playing in any other conference, and it's not. While the SEC, while I do tend to agree that the SEC is the top conference in college football, the Big Ten is a close second. And just like there are bad teams in the SEC, there are bad teams in the Big Ten. There are good teams in the Big Ten, and there are good teams in the SEC. And Alabama has shown that they have weaknesses on their team. So TCU is up next at number 7. I haven't watched a single TCU game all season, and I really should, because they snuck up on me this year. I hadn't put them in the top 10 when I looked at the rankings in the beginning of the year, and who I thought should deserve to be in the top 10. So it'll be interesting. Oh, another thing, Alabama actually plays LSU once again, like that November 5th game on November 5th this year. So that should be an interesting game to watch. So the next 4 teams, or the next 3 teams, are Oregon, USC, and LSU. No real complaints there. I don't really have a complaint until we get down to Kansas State, Utah, and Penn State. I actually think that Illinois, who's ranked at 16, should be above those guys. I think Illinois should be at 12. Again, they only have one loss, and they've played well enough, I think, to deserve that number 13 spot. North Carolina is next up at 17. Oklahoma at 18. Tulane at 19. Syracuse at 20. Wake Forest and NC State at 21 and 22 respectively. Oregon State at 23. Texas at 24. And UCF at 25. So that's the college football playoff rankings. It's the first one of the year. I had issues in the beginning, and I had just one other issue with Illinois. I think should have been higher. But other than that, I think the committee did a fairly decent job. One of the reasons I think Illinois should be higher is they're one of the best teams defensively. They're the defensive leaders in points allowed per game at 8.9. They're followed by Georgia at 10.5. Michigan at 11.5, Minnesota at 14.4, and Iowa at 15.5. And then they're also leading the nation in yards allowed per game, defensive yards allowed per game. So they only allow 224.5 yards per game, followed by Boise State at 232.3, followed by Michigan at 250.3, followed by Georgia at 262.6, and followed by Iowa at 265.6. The Big Ten is really showing up as it usually does on defense. It's really proving that that the Big Ten specialty is defense. It allows, it's four of the 5 defensive points per game leaders are from the Big Ten, and 3 of the top 5 yards allowed per game. Defensive leaders are also from the Big Ten. So it's really they're really showing that they are the best. They're the best defensively. You don't see Ohio State on this list yet, but just because they're not here doesn't mean that they won't be. I mean, they have talking about the Penn State Ohio State game again late in the game. JT Tuimalu. If I probably butchered his name, and I completely apologize, but he really showed up to be really crucial in that game, and he had an interception, and he had a bunch of sacks, and so some stopped runs and things like that. So he really shined in that game. It's a really, I think it's a breakout performance for him, and I think you can expect to see a lot of repeat performances like that from him in the next few games. So that'll be it. That's it for this week's episode. Like I said, this episode is going to be a bit shorter. It's only about 30 minutes. I hope you guys enjoyed. I am starting a channel for this podcast on a separate channel from this one. These live streams will still happen weekly, or at least as much as I can. With school obviously being a factor. But on the other channel, it's by the same name. It's the College Football Fanatics. It's gonna be, so look it up, subscribe. I'm going to have updates throughout the week periodically. I'm probably gonna have 2 more episodes of like 10 to 20 minute segments. So it'll be really interesting. I'll probably have like pre and post game um segments for the big games of the week. So it'll be much more involved. As I said, this episode will still happen weekly here on this channel. But if you guys do want to have more of this podcast, um, the other channel will be starting up pretty soon. I'll be uploading the previous episodes from here onto that channel as well. So you guys can get those episodes there as well, and watch all of my content. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you guys at the same time next week, and I really hope you guys enjoy the games this weekend. So, see you guys and have a great day.